The door slid open before Nora even touched it. The room was dark except for a faint blue glow pulsing from the far corner. She stepped inside, her boots clicking against the metal floor, her heart already doing that thing where it forgot how many beats per second it was supposed to hit. She was not supposed to be here. She knew that. The entire station knew that. Floor 7 was restricted to Xilorian staff only, and Nora Cole was about as far from Xilorian as a person could get. She was human, 5'4", 26 years old, currently 3 weeks into a 6-month contract as a maintenance technician on the interstellar research station Argon 12, orbiting the outer rim of what used to be called No Man's Space and was now diplomatically renamed Cooperative Zone 9. The rename did not make it feel less dangerous. She had come to Floor 7 because the coolant relay on sublevel B was throwing error codes that traced back to a distribution node up here. She had the work order. She had authorization codes for the physical hardware. What she did not have was any expectation of running into anyone at 2 in the morning, station time. The blue glow was coming from a Xilorian male sitting in the corner, slouched against the wall in a wide chair that looked like it had been grown rather than built. His long legs were stretched out in front of him. His head was tilted back. His eyes were closed. He was asleep. In his right hand, held loosely but not dropped, was a tool Nora recognized immediately. A calibration lance. Long, narrow, cylindrical, with a glowing blue tip that indicated active charge. It was the kind of tool that cost more than her entire yearly salary, and could also, if pointed at the wrong thing, cut through 6 inches of reinforced hull plating in under 4 seconds. He was asleep with a calibration lance in his hand. Nora stood completely still in the doorway. Xilorians were not small. This one was at least 7 feet tall, even folded into that chair. With the slate-gray skin that most of the crew on Floor 7 shared, and the faint bioluminescent ridge lines that ran from his temples down the sides of his neck. Those lines glowed when Xilorians were calm. Right now, his were a steady, soft gold. Sleeping, she thought. Actually, deeply, completely asleep. She needed the distribution node that was directly behind him. Nora considered her options in approximately 4 seconds. On option 1. Leave, file a work order update, come back in the morning when someone else would deal with it. The problem with this option was that the coolant relay error she had been sent to fix was not cosmetic. 3 more hours without correction and sublevel B would start a thermal bleed into the residential corridors. 12 people slept down there. 4 of them were children of the Xilorian diplomatic staff, who had no idea their quarters were slowly turning into an oven. So option 2, wake him up. The problem here was that Nora had been briefed, on her first day aboard Argon 12, about exactly 2 things regarding Xilorian crew members. First, their bioluminescent ridgelines would turn red if they felt threatened and orange if they were angry. And she should treat both colors as a reason to move very slowly and very calmly in the opposite direction. Second, waking a Xilorian from deep sleep was considered an act of hostility in their culture, roughly equivalent to walking into someone's home and throwing a punch at the door frame to announce yourself. Option 3. Get the node without waking him. Nora exhaled through her nose. She looked at the calibration lance. She looked at the distance between where she stood and where the node panel was mounted on the wall behind his chair. She looked at the narrow gap between his left side and the wall. 1 meter. Maybe 1.5 meters. She was small. She was quiet. She had spent the last 8 years doing maintenance work in spaces that were not built for humans, which meant she had spent 8 years learning to move through tight spaces without making noise or breaking anything. She set her kit bag down by the door. She pulled out only what she needed: her connector tool, a small diagnostic pad, and the 2 replacement chips for the distribution node. She tucked them in her front chest pocket. She walked forward in the softest way she knew how, which was the way she had learned, working night shifts on the mining platforms off Callisto, where the drill team slept in shifts and you did not wake the off-shift crew unless you wanted to get something thrown at your head. She reached the edge of the chair. The calibration lance hummed very faintly. The blue glow from its tip lit one side of his face. Up close, she could see the small details she had not noticed from across the room. The shallow rise and fall of his chest. The way his fingers curled loosely but did not let go of the tool, even in sleep. The ridge lines along his jaw, gold and steady. Nora had worked alongside 4 Zalorians on this station for 3 weeks and had barely exchanged more than 12 words with any of them. They were not unfriendly. They were simply not interested. She was a maintenance technician with a 6-month contract. They were researchers with a permanent post. The gap between those 2 things on a station like this was wider than the distance between here and Earth. She turned sideways and began to slide through the gap between the chair and the wall. She was almost past him when her connector tool slipped out of her pocket. It did not fall. It caught on the edge of the armrest, balanced for 1 full second that felt like a year. And then dropped to the floor with a sound that in any other situation would have been minor, and in this one rang out like a struck bell. Nora froze. The calibration lance shifted in his hand. She did not breathe. She looked at his ridge lines. They were still gold. He made a sound. Not a word. More like the sound of a person who hears something through a dream and files it under not real. His chin dropped a little lower toward his chest. Nora waited 6 full seconds, counting in her head, before she picked up the connector tool, turned back to the node panel, and got to work. Her hands were steady. She had always been good at that. Whatever her pulse was doing, her hands were separate from it. She opened the panel, identified the 2 failed chips in under 30 seconds, swapped them, ran the diagnostic, got the green confirm. 4 minutes, total. She turned around, slid back through the gap, retrieved her kit bag from the door, walked out without looking back. Then in the corridor, she let herself breathe. She pulled up her comm and filed the work order as complete. Sub-level B was already showing a drop in thermal readings. The 12 people down there would sleep through it without ever knowing. Nora took the lift back to floor 3 and did not mention floor 7 to anyone. She thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. The next morning, she was elbow deep in a ventilation shaft on the east side of level 4, when her supervisor, a compact man named Gary Ortiz, who had the permanent expression of someone being mildly insulted, appeared at the bottom of the shaft and told her she had been summoned. Nora's head appeared from the shaft opening. Summoned by who? Gary pointed up. Floor 7 did not summon maintenance technicians. That was not a thing that happened. Nora climbed out of the shaft, wiped her hands on her work pants, and took the lift up with the very reasonable feeling that she had done something wrong and was about to find out exactly how wrong. The lift opened onto a corridor that was quieter than anywhere else on the station. Gray walls, soft, indirect lighting. The faint smell of something that was not quite a chemical, but was not quite organic either. Xalorian spaces always smelled like that. Nora had never figured out if it was environmental or biological, once the door at the end of the corridor was already open. She walked in. He was standing this time, and that changed everything she had registered the night before. 7 feet became more than a number. The gold ridge lines were still there, but brighter now, active, the way they looked when a Zalorian was thinking hard. The calibration lance was nowhere visible. His hands were at his sides, and he was watching the door with an expression that Nora could not parse at all. She stopped 2 feet inside the room. He said in English that was only faintly accented, "You were here last night." It was not a question. Nora did not look away. "Yes." "You fixed the distribution node on sublevel B." "Yes." "Without waking me." "Yes." A silence. He studied her in the way that Zalorians did, which was direct and unblinking, and made most humans want to find something else to look at. Nora had practiced not finding something else to look at. He said, "Well, why?" She thought about the 12 sleeping people, the 4 kids, the thermal bleed. She said, "Because it needed fixing, and waking you would have caused a problem." His ridgelines shifted. Not red, not orange. Something she had no name for yet. He said, "Most humans would have left." "Most humans don't have sub-level B on their work order," Nora said. Something moved across his face. She was not sure yet if it was amusement. She was not sure yet if Zalorians did amusement the way humans did. But something moved there, quick and genuine, and then it was gone. He said, "My name is Verath." Nora said, "I'm Nora." "I know," Verath said. "I read your file this morning." She blinked. "You read my file?" "You were in my room while I slept," he said. It seemed reasonable. That was, Nora thought, an entirely fair point. What she did not think, in that moment, was that this conversation was the first thread of something that would take the next 3 months to fully pull loose and change the shape of everything she had expected her 6 months on Argon 12 to be. She just thought, gold ridgelines. Still gold. She filed that away and tried to figure out what came next. The next 2 weeks were strange in a quiet way. Verath did not seek her out. He did not show up at her work sites or send messages through the station comm system. But Nora started noticing him in places she had not noticed him before, which was almost certainly because she was now paying attention rather than because he was suddenly everywhere. He worked long hours on Floor 7 with a research team that she had no clearance to know anything about. She knew that much from the way the station roster listed his hours as classified and the way Gary Ortiz had told her on her first day not to ask questions about what the Zalorian team was doing up there. She was not curious by nature. She was practical by nature. The two things were sometimes confused for each other, but they were not the same. What she was, practically speaking, was a woman who now knew that the most senior Zalorian researcher on Argon 12 had read her file, learned her name, and told her so directly. That was information. She did not know yet what to do with it. On a Tuesday station time, she was running diagnostics on the water reclamation system on level 2 when her work pad chirped with an unscheduled maintenance ticket. She looked at it. The ticket was for a calibration fault on a research instrument on Floor 7, assigned specifically to her technician number. She looked at it for a long moment. Gary had not sent it. It had come directly from the Floor 7 research roster. From Verath. Nora took the lift up. The instrument in question was a spectral analysis array, about the size of a large desk, mounted against the wall of a room she had never been in before. It was not the room where she had found him sleeping. This room was brighter, full of equipment she could not name and data displays she could not read. 2 other Zalorians were working at stations across the room. They glanced at her when she entered and then returned to their work. Verath was standing by the array. He had a small diagnostic reader in his hand. He held it out when she approached. "The calibration is drifting on the 4th alignment column," he said. "It has been drifting for 6 days. 2 of my colleagues have attempted to correct it." Nora took the reader. She looked at the readings. She looked at the array. She crouched down and looked at the base housing of the 4th column and saw, in about 40 seconds, what 2 Zilorian researchers with presumably advanced degrees in whatever they were researching had apparently missed. "Your mounting bracket is fractured," she said. "Microfracture along the left lower bolt housing. Every time the array runs a cycle, it vibrates the column out of alignment. You can recalibrate it all day, and it will drift again in 6 hours." A pause. "Is it fixable?" Verath asked. "Yes." Nora was already pulling her kit. 20 minutes. She fixed it in 18. She did not make a production of that. She filed the work order, packed her kit, and stood up. Verath said, "My colleagues have been a research team for 4 years." Nora waited. "They did not find the fracture," he said. "They were probably looking at the software," Nora said. "Most calibration faults are software. This one wasn't." "How did you know to look at the hardware?" She thought about it. "Because I've fixed a lot of things," she said. "And the things that look complicated are usually something simple that nobody checked." His ridgelines were that color again, and the one she had no name for. "That is," he said slowly, "a very Zilorian way of thinking." Nora did not know what to do with that. So she said, "I'll be on level 2 if you need anything else," and took the lift back down. She thought about what he had said for the rest of the day. That is a very Zilorian way of thinking. She did not know if it was a compliment. She decided it probably was. On Thursday, she got another ticket from floor 7. On the following Monday, another. By the end of the 3rd week of this, Gary Ortiz had pulled her aside and told her, with the expression of a man experiencing mild institutional confusion, that floor 7 had formally requested her as a dedicated maintenance liaison for the research team. The request had come from Verath himself and had been approved by the station commander before Gary even knew about it. "You want it?" Gary asked. Nora said yes before she finished processing the question. She still could not read most of Verath's expressions. She could not read the ridgeline color she kept seeing. But she knew the shape of something that was being offered carefully by someone who had decided she was worth the offer. She had spent her whole career being treated as interchangeable, replaceable, a technician number on a work order. Nobody had ever read her file the morning after meeting her. Nobody had ever said that the way she thought was recognizable to them. She reported to floor 7 on Monday morning. Verath was at his station. He did not look up when she came in. He said, "There is a pressure variance in the coolant line on the east wall. It has been minor for 2 weeks, but it will not stay minor." Nora set down her kit bag. "Show me," she said. And they got to work. The pressure variance in the east wall coolant line turned out to be the beginning of a much larger problem, which was itself the beginning of Nora understanding what the Floor 7 research team was actually doing. She was not given classified briefings. She was not handed data she did not have clearance for. But she was in the room, fixing things, while people worked and talked. And Nora Cole had always been very good at listening without appearing to listen. The Zilorian research team on Floor 7 was not, as she had vaguely assumed, studying the outer rim systems or conducting the kind of deep space atmospheric surveys that most research stations in Cooperative Zone 9 were funded to do. They were studying something older. Something that the preliminary data on the screens she was not supposed to look at described, in the brief moments when she happened to catch the language she could read, as pre-convergence architecture. She did not know what pre-convergence meant in this context. She filed it away. What she did understand, within the first week of working regularly on the floor, was the team dynamic. There were 6 Silurian researchers plus Verath, who was technically classified as a senior research director, but who worked longer hours than anyone and had a habit of taking apart equipment himself when the problem was interesting enough, which was how he had ended up asleep in the corner with a calibration lance in his hand on the night Nora had first come to floor 7. The other 6 treated her with the particular distant courtesy that senior academics tend to show people who fix things for them, which was polite and impersonal and made her feel like a vending machine that occasionally needed maintenance of its own. Verath was not like that. He was not warm in any way she could easily describe, but he was specific. He asked her questions that required actual answers. He listened when she explained things. When she told him that a particular piece of equipment was due for a full housing inspection within the next 30 days, he scheduled it immediately rather than noting it and forgetting, which was what every other researcher she had ever worked with did. On a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks into her new role, she was replacing a filter housing in the lower section of the main lab array when she heard Verath tell the rest of the team that he was running the evening calibration sequence alone and they should go eat. The others left. Nora kept working on the filter housing. She was almost done when she heard, from directly behind her, "You do not eat?" She turned. Verath was closer than she had expected, me standing with the calibration reader in one hand and looking at her with that particular Zalorian directness she had stopped flinching from. "I was almost done," she said. "Your shift ended," he said, 40 minutes ago. Nora looked at her calm. He was right. "The housing seal was degraded," she said. "If I'd left it for tomorrow, it would have failed overnight. And if it had failed overnight, you would have come back at 2 in the morning to fix it," Verath said. But there was something in his voice she had not heard before. Not amusement, exactly. Something with more weight. "Probably," Nora said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Stay past your shift. Come in the middle of the night. Fix things that no one has asked you to fix yet." Nora thought about it honestly. "Because they need fixing," she said. "And because if something breaks and people get hurt, the fact that my shift ended doesn't really mean anything." The ridgelines along his jaw shifted. Brighter gold. She had been paying enough attention now to know that brighter meant something specific, but she had not yet figured out the vocabulary for what. "Most humans on this station," Verath said, "treat their contract hours as a border. Most of them are also not the ones who get called when something breaks at 2 in the morning," Nora said. Something crossed his face again, in that fast, genuine thing that was gone before she could catalog it. "Go eat," he said. "I will finish the calibration." Nora packed her kit. She walked to the door. She stopped. "Verath." He looked at her. "The pre-convergence data on the secondary screen," she said carefully. "The structural resonance patterns. They look like the load-bearing signatures I've seen in deep-core mining architecture. But older. A lot older." The room was very quiet. "How do you know what deep-core mining architecture looks like?" he asked. "I worked the Callisto platforms for 3 years," she said. "We dug into formations that were 400 million years old. The resonance patterns we cataloged looked like that." Verath did not move. His ridgelines were doing something she had never seen before. Not gold. Not the unnamed color. Something between them, shifting. "Nora," he said. "Yeah." "What else did you see on Callisto?" She thought about it. "I'll need clearance," she said. for that conversation. A pause, long enough that she thought she had pushed too far, which was a line she was still learning the location of. Then he said, "I will arrange it." She nodded once and took the lift down. She ate alone in the station cafeteria and thought about deep core resonance patterns and pre-convergence architecture and the expression on the face of a Zalorian researcher who had just realized that the human technician he had hired to fix his equipment might know something his 4-year research team did not. She thought, this is the part where things get complicated. She was not wrong. The clearance came through in 48 hours, which by the standards of the station administrative process was roughly the equivalent of someone sprinting through a building that normally moved at a slow walk. Nora received the notification on her comm at 6 in the morning and spent 10 minutes reading the access level that had been granted to her before she fully believed what it said. She had been given Level 4 research access on Floor 7. That was the same level as the junior members of Vareth's team, and it did not come with a research role or a change to her contract classification. She was still, officially, a maintenance technician. But she could now enter the main data lab, access the non-classified research files, and participate in what the document described as relevant technical consultations. Gary Ortiz called her 20 minutes later, sounding like a man whose understanding of institutional hierarchy had just been quietly set on fire. "Did you know about this?" he asked. "Not before this morning," Nora said. "They gave you Level 4 access," Gary said. "Nora, I have Level 3. "I know. Why do they—" He stopped. "You know what? Fine. Just don't break anything up there." Nora took the lift to Floor 7. The research team was already assembled when she arrived. 5 of the 6 junior researchers were at their stations. Vareth was standing at the front of the room by the main display, which was showing a 3-dimensional structural map that Nora did not fully understand, but recognized in the way you recognize the shape of something you've seen in a different context. Vareth said, "Nora has been granted Level 4 access to contribute to the technical analysis component of the current project." He said it without preamble, the way he said everything. The 5 researchers looked at her. The response ranged from neutral to mildly skeptical. None of them said anything. Vareth turned to the main display. "We have been working for 14 months, he said, to identify and categorize a series of structural formations in the deep geological record of 7 outer rim bodies. The formations are consistent across all 7 bodies, despite the bodies being separated by enormous distances and having no recorded contact in any historical period we can document. The formations are not natural. They are constructed. They are old in a way that challenges our current model of when spacefaring civilizations first emerged in this region of space." Nora looked at the structural map. "What is the estimated age?" she asked. "Conservative estimate," Vareth said, "is 800 million years. Our data suggests it may be significantly older." Nora looked at the map for a long time. "The Callisto formations," she said, "that we cataloged during deep core extraction. We logged them as geological anomalies. Even the survey team flagged them as non-natural, but the company filed them under low-priority, unknown origin, and we never went back." "We know," Vareth said. "We found your company's survey logs 6 months ago. That is part of why I requested you specifically." The room was very quiet. Nora said, "You requested me because of the Callisto survey." "I requested you because of the Callisto survey," Vareth said. "Malbron, and because your technician record indicated someone who looked past the surface of problems to find what was actually wrong. I needed both." One of the junior researchers, a woman named Zeleth, who had been the most visibly skeptical when Nora walked in, looked between them with an expression Nora was learning to read as Exilorian recalculation. Reassessment. The moment when a prior conclusion gets quietly revised. The formations on Callisto, Nora said. Do they match the map? Verath moved to the display and brought up a secondary overlay. The formations from the Callisto survey logs, which Nora recognized from 3 years of working around them, aligned with the structures on the map in a way that made her chest feel like something had just shifted inside it. They match, Verath said. Nora stared at the overlay. This is not 7 bodies, she said. This is a network. Yes, Verath said. Someone built a network, Nora said. 800 million years ago, across this entire region of space. Yes, she looked at him. And nobody knows who. That, Verath said, is what we are trying to find out. The junior researchers were all looking at her now. Zelith had stopped looking skeptical. The shift in the room was not dramatic. It was the quiet shift of a group of people recognizing that someone they had filed under irrelevant had just moved to a different category. Nora turned back to the display. The network overlay stretched across 7 points of the outer rim, ancient and deliberate and entirely unknown. She thought about being 22 years old on the Callisto platform, drilling into formations she had not understood, logging them as anomalies and moving on because that was not her job, and nobody had told her it mattered. She thought about 800 million years of something waiting to be found. Show me everything you have, she said. Verath pulled up the full research archive. They worked for 11 hours. The 11 hours turned into 3 days that Nora experienced mostly as a continuous state of focus, broken only by sleep. When Verath told her, at 2 in the morning on the second night, that she was going to make mistakes in the analysis if she did not rest. She slept for 5 hours, woke up, and came back. The research team, she noticed, had stopped treating her like a vending machine somewhere around the end of day 1. Zelith had started asking her direct questions by day 2. By day 3, the junior researcher named Korath, who was the quietest of the group, had started sending her data notes without being asked. The network was not just old. It was active. Not in any obvious way. Not broadcasting, not transmitting. Even not doing anything that a survey instrument pointed at it would register as more than background geological activity. But when Nora pulled up the deep core resonance logs from Callisto and cross-referenced them against the equivalent data Verath's team had collected from the other 6 bodies, the pattern was unmistakable. The formations were resonating, slowly, cyclically, at intervals that, when she calculated them backward, had been going on for as long as the records existed. It is a clock, Nora said, at roughly hour 30 of the combined analysis. The room went still. It could be structural vibration, Zelith said. Natural resonance from, at those intervals, Nora said. Across 7 bodies separated by this distance, with this degree of synchronization. She turned the display so Zelith could see the overlay she had built. This is not natural resonance. The synchronization index is 0.997. That is not geology. That is a mechanism. Zelith looked at the display for a long time. She's right, Korath said, from the back of the room. Verath had been standing at the edge of the main display for the last 2 hours, watching Nora work, saying very little. He said now, if it is a clock, what is it counting toward? Nora looked at the interval pattern. She ran the projection forward. She ran it forward and then ran it again because the first result seemed too clean, too timed, too close. She looked up. 4 months, she said. The next full-cycle resonance event is in 4 months. Nobody spoke. Whatever this network does when it completes a cycle, Nora said. We have 4 months to figure it out before it does it. The silence in the room was the specific silence of people who had been working for a long time toward a conclusion and had not expected it to arrive with a deadline attached. Nora understood that silence. She had heard it on the Callisto platform once, when a drill team had broken through into a chamber that should not have existed, and everyone had gone very quiet while they worked out what that meant. Verath said, "Then we work faster." Nora nodded. She pulled up a new analysis window. She thought about 800 million years, about a clock that nobody had known was running, about a network built by something that was gone before anything she knew of had existed, still ticking in the bones of 7 worlds. She thought about the night she had come to floor 7 to fix a coolant relay and found a Zalorian researcher asleep in a chair with a calibration lance in his hand, and how she had almost left, and how everything that came after had started because she had not. She looked at the display. She looked at the network. She looked at 4 months. She got to work. The 4 months did not feel like 4 months. They felt like one continuous problem that kept unfolding into more of itself every time Nora thought she had reached the bottom of it. She had been a maintenance technician for 8 years. She knew how to work long hours and stay functional and not collapse under the weight of problems that did not want to be solved. But this was different from anything she had worked on before. And the difference was not the scale of it, though the scale was staggering. The difference was that for the first time in her career, the work she was doing mattered in a way she could not compartmentalize. Verath had a theory. Nora had a different theory. They had been having the same argument in various forms for 6 weeks. Verath's theory was that the resonance cycle was a self-maintenance mechanism, that whatever civilization had built the network had designed it to periodically recalibrate its own structural integrity. The 4-month event would be a maintenance cycle. The network would resonate, correct for any drift, and continue. Nora's theory was that the clock was not self-referential. It was signaling outward. A maintenance system does not need this level of synchronization precision, she said, on a Tuesday afternoon 6 weeks into the analysis. The synchronization index is not about structural integrity. It is about being received, accurately, at a distance. Received by what? Verath said. Mars, there is no detected receiver. There was no detected network until 14 months ago, Nora said. That does not mean there is no receiver. It means we have not found it. Verath was quiet for a moment. This was his version of conceding the point without conceding it verbally, which Nora had learned to recognize. If you are right, he said, and the network is signaling outward, then the 4-month event is not a maintenance cycle. It is a transmission, and something is meant to receive it. Yes, Nora said. And we have no idea what that something is or what it will do when it receives the signal. Also yes, Nora said. Verath looked at the display. That is a significantly more alarming conclusion than mine. I know, Nora said. I have been hoping you would find a flaw in it. I have been looking, he said. She believed him. That was the thing about working with Verath for 6 weeks. He did not dismiss ideas because he disagreed with them. He took them apart carefully and honestly and either found the flaw or acknowledged that he could not. On a Thursday, 8 weeks before the projected resonance event, Verath filed a report with the station commander and the Cooperative Zone 9 Oversight Board. Nora was listed as a contributing analyst. This was not a category that existed in her contract. Verath had created it specifically for the report. She found out when she received the copy. She went up to floor 7. Verath was at his station. "You listed me as contributing analyst," she said. "You contributed to the analysis," he said. "It would have been inaccurate not to." "My contract is maintenance technician." "Your contract can be amended," he said. "I have submitted the request." Nora stood in the doorway for a moment. "You should have told me before you submitted it," she said. He looked up from his station. "Would you have objected?" She thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "Then the sequence of events does not change the outcome," he said. "It changes whether I got to make the choice myself," Nora said. The ridgelines along his jaw shifted. She had been watching them long enough now to understand more of the vocabulary. This was the color that appeared when he was recalculating, reassessing. "You are right," he said. "I should have asked first. I am sorry." Nora had worked with a lot of people who would have argued the point instead. People who would have told her she was being difficult, or that she should be grateful, or that contracts were administrative details that did not matter. Verath had said, "You are right. I am sorry." She filed that away in the same place she had been filing everything she noticed about him for 2 months. "It is fine," she said. "Just ask next time." "I will," he said. She sat down at the secondary analysis station and opened the resonance data. The 8 weeks before the resonance event were the most intense of Nora's professional life. This was not the adrenaline of immediate danger. It was the sustained pressure of trying to understand something enormous before it did something you could not predict and possibly could not reverse. They confirmed, at week 6, that Nora's transmission theory was correct. The confirmation came through an analysis that Korath had been running on the resonance harmonics. The network was not broadcasting in all directions. It was aimed. The target point, when Korath ran the geometry, was outside the cooperative zone entirely, in a region of deep space that the Zilorian cartographic records classified as surveyed uninhabited. "Surveyed by whom?" Nora asked, when Zelith presented the data. "By us," Zelith said. "By Zilorian survey teams, approximately 300 years ago." "And before that?" A silence. "Before that," Verath said, "it was not surveyed." Nora looked at the target point on the display. 800 million years is a long time for something to be in a region we have only been looking at for 300 years. Nobody argued with that. The escalation of the report to the Oversight Board generated a response Nora had not anticipated. Within 3 weeks, the station had received 4 additional research teams and 1 group of people whose institutional affiliation was not listed on the manifest, and who moved through the station with a quality of deliberateness that Nora recognized as the professional manner of people who were not researchers. She mentioned this to Verath. "I know," he said. "I requested only academic support." "What interpretation does the Oversight Board have?" Nora asked. "That a network of unknown origin transmitting an ancient signal toward an unknown destination is a security situation before it is a research situation." Nora thought about this. Are they wrong? Verath was quiet for a moment. "They are not wrong," he said. "I disagree with their priorities, but they are not wrong." The unlisted team was a cooperative zone security assessment unit. Nora fixed a ventilation fault in their temporary workspace on level 6 on 2 weeks before the resonance event, and was in the room for 40 minutes. She told Verath that evening what she had heard. "They believe the transmission target is not uninhabited," she said. Verath did not react immediately. His ridgelines shifted. What do they believe is there? He said. They do not know, Nora said. But they have picked up anomalous readings from the target region in the last 3 weeks that were not present in the survey records. Verath pulled up the display and brought up the deep space mapping for the target region. It looked the same as it always had. Empty, distant, 800 million years of nothing. Anomalous how? He said. They described it, Nora said, as a waking up pattern. The room was very still. Verath said, like a system coming online. That is what it sounded like, Nora said. They looked at the target region on the display for a long time. Nora thought about the clock, about 800 million years, about the fact that the clock was not counting down to a maintenance cycle. It was counting down to a conversation. Verath, she said. Yes. Whatever comes next, she said. We need the full data record accessible and backed up off-station. Everything we have found. The Callisto logs, onto the resonance analysis, the transmission geometry, all of it. In case something goes wrong, he said. In case something goes right, she said. And nobody believes us. He looked at her. Understood, he said. He started the backup. She started compiling the full record. 14 days, she thought. 14 days and they would know. She was, for the first time in a long time, genuinely afraid. It was not a bad feeling. It was the kind of fear that meant she was standing at the edge of something real. She kept working. The resonance event happened at 3:14 in the morning, station time, 14 days later. Nora was awake. The entire research team was awake. The security unit was awake. Roughly half the station had stayed up, because the word had spread in the way that words always spread on small stations where people share air circulation systems and the walls between departments are thinner than the official briefings suggest. They had moved the primary analysis to the main observation deck. The deck was crowded. Nora was standing at her usual station. Zelith was to her left. Korath was behind her. Verath was at the center display. At 3:11, the resonance readings across all 7 network bodies began to shift. Not dramatically. Not in a way that any sensor would flag as critical. It was a harmonic change, a settling into alignment that Nora could see in the data. The way she could see the moment a calibration reached its correct point. Not a new thing happening, an old thing arriving. At 3:14, the network resonated. The data feeds lit up across every screen. The resonance pattern was complete, synchronized. The precision index hitting 1.0 for the first time in all the measurements they had taken. And from the network, across the deep space geometry that Korath had mapped, something went out. Nora watched the transmission data. It was not a sound, and it was not a light, and it was not anything she had vocabulary for. It was a signal in the oldest possible sense of the word. A thing sent with intention to be received. The room was completely quiet. They waited. At 3:19, lost 5 minutes after the transmission, the sensors pointed at the target region registered a response. Not the waking up pattern the security unit had been tracking. Something more deliberate, structured. The same harmonic signature as the network, reflected back with a variation that Nora stared at for a long moment before she understood what it was. It was an answer. It answered. Zelith said very quietly in Zalorian, and then repeated it in English, because Nora was the only person in the room who needed the translation. Nora already knew. She had seen it in the data. The response from the target region continued for approximately 90 seconds and then ceased. The network resonance dropped back to its standard background level. The target region returned to silence. Nobody moved. Then Korath said, "The response has a structural component. It is not just an acknowledgement. It contains data." Varath looked at Nora. Nora looked at the data stream from the response. She said slowly, "It is a location." Another silence. "It is giving us a location," she said. Something at the target region received the signal, confirmed it, and sent back a location. A different location, somewhere else. The room processed this. "A meeting place?" Varath said. "Or a destination," Nora said. "Or a set of directions. Or something we do not have a cultural framework for yet." She looked at the location data. "But it is pointing somewhere new, somewhere neither the network survey nor our current mapping has any record of." The security unit team lead, a compact woman named Dana, who had been standing at the back of the room for the entire event, said, "Is it a threat?" Nora thought about the precision of the signal, the patience of it. 800 million years of a clock running, waiting for the moment when someone was in the room to hear it. "No," she said. "I do not think it is a threat." "What do you think it is?" Dana asked. Nora looked at the location data on the screen. She looked at the network map. She looked at the trajectory that went from 7 ancient structures to a target that had woken up to a new point beyond both. "I think," she said, "it is an introduction. From something that has been waiting a very long time for someone to notice the clock." Dinah absorbed this. Varath said, "We will need to file an updated report." "Yes," Nora said, "and we will need to decide what to do with the location." "What do you think we should do with it?" Zelith asked. Nora thought about Callisto, about the formations she had logged as anomalies and moved on from because it was not her job to wonder about them. Not about the 14 months Varath's team had spent building toward a question they had answered tonight, with more questions. About a maintenance ticket filed at 2 in the morning that had sent her to floor 7 with a work order and no expectation of anything beyond the work. "I think," she said, "we should go." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Varath said, "That is exactly what I think." The ridge lines along his jaw were bright gold, brighter than she had ever seen them. Not the unnamed color, not the recalculating color. Something she thought she had been building a vocabulary for over 3 months and 1,100 hours of shared work, without fully acknowledging what the vocabulary was for. She looked at the location on the display. She looked at Varath. "I will need a different contract," she said. He said, "I will have it drawn up in the morning." Nora turned back to the display. Somewhere beyond the outer rim, beyond the target region, beyond every survey map they had, something was waiting. Patient, ancient, ready. She thought about 800 million years. She thought, we are just getting started. Outside the observation deck, Argon 12 turned slowly in the dark, and the network hummed its quiet, steady hum. And the stars were where they had always been, full of things that no one had found yet. Nora looked at the location data one more time. She memorized it. She was going to need it.